Got the oil pan out, and that was no easy task. Removing the starter, the splash shield for the transmission, all the bolts along the oil pan there. One of them you need a deep socket for because it's got like a plastic connector to hold the transmission lines. And then after you've got all the bolts out and everything like that, it's going to be a little bit of a Jenga session. Get it out from underneath the front differential there. So as you can see here, I just kind of got some blocks of wood and I just lifting the body up, and I still have the Jeep front axle supported on both sides. There's some jack stands. I even disconnected this front steering linkage here in an attempt to try and get a little more wiggle room to articulate that pan out of there. Ready to put on this transmission pan, so we've welded our bung for our drain plug here, and I also did another one for the temp sensor that for those 3 gauges that we're installing in the cab there. Got everything all cleaned up, got our magnet back in here. We just basically set the gasket on silicone the one side. Usually when you're disassembling things, you want the gasket to remain on the piece that you're removing. The idea being that it's going to be easier to clean the gasket off of that surface than it would be off of the one on the vehicle. So underneath here we've got our filter bolted on there, and we've got that surface all cleaned up really good. So then all we got to do now is just bolt on that pan. As it turns out, I guess this transmission filter will not work because it's too thick. The pan over there wouldn't go on, so we had to remove that filter and then put in that thin style filter so the pan will go on. So just an FYI out there, in my application, this filter is too thick and it will not allow the pan to go on. Got the oil pan all cleaned up here, sandblasted it, sanded it up. We'll clean it all up and give some paint on the outside. Inside I'm not worried about there. The oil will lubricate the metal and keep it from rusting. When I took this pan out, there's a bunch of sludge and crap and debris in the bottom there, and that's because when you're draining your oil, it's only going to drain to the top of that bung there, and that's going to be 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch above the bottom of the pan, so you're not going to get all that oil out of there and all that junk and stuff and sludge. It'll just form in the bottom. And I think what happened here was we'd lost our adhesion between the gasket and the metal on the back here, and that's where it was leaking. So it's basically leaking on this face here and this metal. I think the gasket is just old. It's lost its stick between the metal and the gasket on either side of the gasket. That's where it started leaking. I also noticed this on the transmission pan as well. So just old gaskets. Time to change them out, reseal them with some good sealant, and reinstall it, and then hopefully we won't have no more leaks. Up here in the front and all the way down, and then at the back there we've got everything all cleaned up and ready to go. Got that starter removed. That's all dirty. We're going to clean that up, put that back in there. We didn't want any dirt compromising our seal when we install this thing for sealing surfaces for the gasket. We've got the pan all cleaned up, painted, and our plugs in, ready to go there. So on the surface here, we've sanded that down, cleaned it all up. You can use brake cleaner, acetone, something like that, like an alcohol, to clean the surface. And then now we have our gasket. Can't really go wrong here. This side is larger than that side, so it only goes on one way. This is for the back, and this piece here actually kind of fits in a little channel underneath the vehicle there. The way this gasket is designed, if you can see, there's 2 little ribs there and around the holes. So basically when you torque this down, that is your squish and seal, and that's on both sides. If you look at it, same thing on the other side there. Technically, because of those 2 ribs in the design of the gasket, you don't need silicone. This isn't going to stay put when you're trying to lift this pan into place and everything, right? It might end up actually getting damaged, and these corners here, actually, they're going to be really delicate because you've got reinforced metal in here, and then this just goes to a rubber end here. So that's not very thick in there, and that's kind of delicate, and you might tear or damage that gasket. So I'm going to try and put this in the vehicle first, kind of hold it into place, and then try and manipulate the pan where it needs to go. On this end here, there's a little rib, like a valley, that this will go in, so that should hold that fairly well. A couple dabs of silicone in the corners and stuff, and maybe a couple dabs just to hold the sides, and then install the pan after it's all in place. I might then let that silicone set for a while so it'll hold it real good. As you can see, I just used some silicone and the bolts to adhere that gasket to the block. I've got it held up in the front here. And again in the back. Here's that transmission pan after it's installed. Right there's our temp sensor that we installed there. Get the temperature for our 3 gauges that we're putting upstairs. And we've got our drain plug here. No leaks, everything looks good here. As we look around all the hardware under here, here's the new pan installed with that new gasket. And it goes all the way back there by the exhaust. Our bolts on both sides here. And up in the front. So we have our oil pan installed and our transmission pan installed. All the leaks are fixed, and we'll move on to the next thing.